Today I'm speaking with Anthony Dominello. Anthony, thank you so much for joining me today.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Anthony is from Philadelphia. I'm as well. I grew up right near the airport. He and his wife, Mare, now live in New Jersey. He studied quite a bit. This is an interesting list: electro-optics, laser physics, biomedical engineering, and music therapy. He got his bachelor's there at Shenandoah University. He is an IT professional by day, a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and he's had various other jobs, such as an opera singer, which is pretty interesting, a film score composer, and singer-songwriter. And I'm more than a little jealous of your abilities on that level. He's also a Recovering from Religion ambassador and a support group leader. On that note, I'll have the links for Recovering from Religion beneath this video. Please go check them out if you can benefit from their help. They are awesome. I've used them myself to speak to people when I first deconverted. But besides what I know about you so far, Anthony, could you tell us more about yourself and maybe some of your hobbies?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, right now I have a studio which you can't see here because of my background, which is because it's a rec too. I do right now. I'm not doing a whole lot of music work because a lot of the projects have dried up. But I do some sound engineering for podcasts. In fact, I guess what would be interesting is that Bart Ehrman has a blog. And when you join his blog at a certain level, you get an audio feed of it. And currently, I'm the editor and engineer that posts those blog entries readings. So that's kind of what I do now. It's kind of cool to work for Bart Ehrman, who I've enjoyed his stuff for many years. But
Yeah, that's awesome. I've
so
been watching the stuff he's been doing with Megan recently. That's it's his
yeah,
great videos.
that's not the one I work on. That's another one. So,
Right.
but
Yeah,
I
he's a
don't know
great
who works on that.
he's a great resource. Well,
Yeah,
tell us some
yeah.
of your hobbies or other quirky things about yourself.
Recovering from religion has really been a lot of what I've done for the past 2 years since I joined. It's taken up a lot of my time, but I study history quite a bit. My interest in religion started in the 80s. Religion is an academic study, that is. And with two books by Elaine Pagels, who's an excellent biblical scholar at Princeton Theological Seminary. But hers were the first general audience books, but written by a scholar that I read, and I'm pretty sure she's one of the first people that to actually do that. Scholars to actually write on a scholarly subject, but for a general audience. And so I often say Elaine Pagels was my gateway drug to biblical studies and history. But I've
Hmm.
always been interested in ancient history, and so a lot of the YouTube channels that I subscribe to are things like Told in Stone, which is about the classical world, and oh, I forget his name. David Miano has a channel called World of Antiquity. That's what it's called, and he goes over a lot of things, and he does a lot of debunking of some of the misinformation that you hear and stuff like that, stuff like ancient aliens and other sort of nonsense that gets passed around on the internet. Of course, following a lot of things, but that's kind of a lot. It's not all it's all religion adjacent, although it's not necessarily adjacent to just Judaism, Christianity, Islam, just the Abrahamic faiths, but really just all the religions of the ancient Near East and things like that. So,
That's awesome. Could I ask just real quick before we jump into your story? Since we're both from Philadelphia, what is your favorite Philadelphia food?
oh God, I'd probably say the cheesesteak still.
Yeah.
But close second would be the soft pretzels. They don't really do them like they do in New York. I mean, they're served basically at room temperature or outdoor temperature, depending on where you get them. But I like the fact that they're soft and they're not warm, so they get that burnt stuff on them. I know a lot of people from the New York area love that, but I don't. There's a very distinct style of Philadelphia pretzel. So those are really the two kind of stereotypical. I also like the sandwich nobody else knows about that's very popular in Philadelphia, which is the roast pork sandwich.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, obviously apart from the pretzels, a lot of meat there. Sorry for all the vegans and vegetarians out there, but I still do the meat thing.
Yeah. I miss the cheesesteaks a lot. I mean, you get a really good Philly cheesesteak and a big order of cheese fries with that fake orange cheese, and oh, it's delicious, and you regret it about 10 minutes later. Anyway,
I never liked the cheese whiz. I was always an American cheese kind of guy on my cheesesteaks.
okay, probably a little
That
healthier.
was yeah, well, barely, but it's just I guess it's what I grew up with. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, on our channel here at Harmonic Atheist, we love to invite people to share their stories. If you could tell us, your journey. I know that your journey is a little bit different than some of the people I typically interview, but just take us away. Tell us your journey with Christianity and all religions, really.
Well, I started out with Christianity. I was born into a what I would call a marginally Catholic home. My parents were both from Catholic households and were more culturally Catholic than anything, sometimes called, Christmas and Easter Catholics. It's 2 times a year they show up at church, and sometimes not even Christmas. More often it was Easter because Christmas midnight mass was a little tougher for my parents. And I was totally into it. My parents really didn't push me into it at all. In fact, my father was downright hostile to a lot of the things in the Catholic Church, partly because when my parents got married, I was a whoops baby in 1962. So when my mom and dad they eloped to Atlantic City, which a lot of people back in the 60s were 50s and 60s were doing. They eloped to Atlantic City for kind of a quickie wedding. But my grandmother, one of my grandparents, I think it was on my mother's side, basically insisted that it get blessed in a church, so they have a proper Catholic wedding. But the problem is because they eloped, when they found out that they eloped and they were married, and my mom was already having a kid, they excommunicated them. And so obviously a marriage wasn't going to happen. So they had to be reinstated, which cost $14 for the two of them, which soured my father even further on the Catholic Church because he was absolutely offended the idea that you could buy your way into heaven and stuff like that. So he was kind
Wow.
of a believer, but he didn't like the institution itself. In fact, later on, I was going to catechism. I was going to a public school in Northeast Philadelphia, and I was taking catechism classes at the Catholic school across the way, across the if you know Harbison Avenue in Northeast Philly. And I said to my dad, I want to go to Catholic school because I was really digging what I was learning, and he said absolutely not. Because he went to Catholic school, he had a miserable time. My mom had a miserable time in her Catholic school. They met at a vocational school because they were both kicked out of their respective Catholic schools. Um, and so, well, I was also interested in becoming a priest. And so my dad said, well, there's special schools we can send you to. So, but you have to be a certain age for this. If you're still interested, when you get to that age, we'll send. And that was fine. Then we moved. We moved to South Jersey, not far from where I live now, actually. Where I live now is literally right on the Delaware River across from Philadelphia, so it's not far at all.
Okay.
I can walk 2 blocks to the waterfront. Yeah, you can make jokes about, oh, I moved to New Jersey and lost faith in God or something like that, but nothing that crazy. I just found myself kind of a fish out of water. I mean, because Philadelphia is such a diverse place, and I move into this kind of white suburban monoculture that I just didn't get along with. Also, did not realize there were reasons, and I was not getting along well with my peers. And let's put a pin in that because the reason comes out many, many years later. So I really wasn't interested in that anymore, but I was still interested in religion. And I tried to be an altar boy. I didn't make that. And then at one point, I had a friend who was going to a Baptist church, and he asked me if I wanted to accept Jesus into my heart and talking to me about being saved and everything like that. And I was just like, yeah, sure, why not? So this pastor came over, youth group leader, whatever it was, and I was all excited because the way he described it was just like this wondrous thing. This like a Jesus in your heart. Wow, how cool would that be? Because I was still very into the Jesus thing. In fact, when I got my confirmation, I wanted my confirmation name to be Jesus, and my nuns pulled me aside and said absolutely no, which made me really, which kind of ticked me off because there were a lot of Hispanic kids whose real names were Jesus, but let that pass. So I chose Joseph. Next best thing. So I go in and I sit down there and I say the prayer and I'm holding the Bible and reading the verses and everything like that. And then at one point the pastor shakes my hand and he said, "Congratulations, you've accepted Jesus into your heart." And I remember thinking, "That's it." I literally felt nothing. And none of the things I'm like, did I do something wrong? What was wrong with me? And I know a lot of people. We were talking beforehand, and I said a lot of people who leave Christianity um, get the criticism from people who are still in it. That, oh, so and so was never really a Christian anyway. In my case, they'd probably have a good argument to make, but I was always seeking. I was always looking for what was promised.
Mm.
And I was very intolerant when things were not the same as they were on paper. Again, put a pin in that. The reason comes up later on in life. I mean, decades later. Um, so I mean, I started going to that church for a while, and I was also one of those kids that my mom, when it was summertime, as all of us who were old enough to be sent to vacation Bible school were sent to vacation Bible school. She didn't very much care what church was holding it, as long as we were out of the house for some period of time during the summer. So, and after having kids of my own, I totally get that. I wouldn't necessarily send them to a vacation Bible school, but somewhere would be nice.
Yeah, get a little sanity and peace and quiet.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't work when they're in their 30s. Just, you have children, it stops working after a while.
Well, I've got four kids aged 9 and under, so I definitely get it. It's a romper room all the time.
Yeah. So so then kind of time passes, and I really was afraid. I had a lot of anxiety as a kid, but most of it was really tied to science. I was really into science, but of course, whenever you're reading science, you run across two things. Run across things that are genuinely frightening, and some of those things are actually very reality based. A lot of those things are we would now call misinformation or false information, but at the time, with no internet and not a whole lot of fact checking going on, and also being 8 or 9 years old, I felt a lot of things. But I was a very precocious child. I read The Andromeda Strain when I was 8, and I was terrified because it was written so realistically. The science behind it was absolutely solid, and it was presented as kind of like, oh, this is something that actually happened and stuff like that, which is probably the best thing Michael Crichton ever wrote. I don't think anything he wrote after that was as good. But he was in Harvard Medical School at the time he wrote it, so it reflected that science, that hard science edge.
I haven't read that book or heard of it. What, just could you give an example of maybe a thing or two about science, or at least the purported science, that was frightening, and like how you responded to it?
Well, the interesting thing about the book, especially, the movie has a couple of departures from it, but it's pretty much the same as the book. And he didn't make up a lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff that he wrote about was at least theoretically possible, and the technology that he talks about in the book was, I mean, it was cutting edge when he wrote it in the 70s, but it was real technology. For instance, because I also knew about, biological warfare, and of course, you always run across the conspiracy theories about that. So I was terrified of biological warfare. I was terrified of nuclear attack. I was alive when Cahootech came, and I thought that was a portent of the end of the world. Totally bought that hook, line, and sinker. I stood in line to see the late great planet Earth and was absolutely terrified by it. But it was really, in retrospect, it was obviously feeding off of a pre-existing anxiety that I just fed myself. I just everything I read in science, unfortunately, just showed me more things that were really horrible and possible.
Well, could you give an example of like something that was specifically fearful? Like, we're talking about like the Earth blowing up or something, or like what was something that really scared you and kept you up at night?
It was really natural phenomena. The idea of an asteroid or comet hitting the Earth, or as in the case of Cahootech, supposedly mixing with the atmosphere and having some effect on us and things like that. I mean, and I didn't know that. I didn't know enough to even investigate the validity or lack of that from these claims and things like that. But it was mostly natural phenomena. It wasn't. I didn't really. I mean, I certainly believe that it could have had a supernatural cause,
Right.
but natural phenomena, and also including war. Because if you read Late Great Planet Earth and all of those things, there's a lot of things that they'll quote a verse from Revelation, and they'll say, "Ooh, is this the B-1 bomber that has a laser in its tail gunner and stuff like that?" Which, by the way, isn't true, but I didn't find that out too much later. Anyway, and so it was a lot of linking of these things to prophecies. Oddly enough, I got just as crazy about Nostradamus prophecies as I did about the Book of Revelation, Late Great Planet Earth, all that stuff. And I just took them equally seriously. It never occurred to me that there was any possible contradiction, because I figured, everybody's looking for the truth, and maybe they're going about it different ways, and so nobody has a problem with anybody. I learned later that this was not true, in fact, which brings us to our next thing.
If I could just interject one thing real quick about
Yeah,
what you just
sure.
said.
Sorry.
That movie, what is it, Don't Look Up, with Matt Damon and Jennifer Lawrence, about the
I've not
asteroids.
seen it. Haven't seen it yet, unfortunately. I do want to
Okay.
see it, but
You
yeah,
probably you probably know enough to know the gist, but yeah, it's like that. It's that sense of like nobody believes that the worst could happen, and then of course it does. And
yeah,
it's one of those things that it kind of puts a lump in your throat to think, I've just been entertained. This is a really kind of fun movie. They certainly do it in a funny way. They weave a lot of comedy into it, but you're
Mm.
like, that actually could be our future, like for real.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it kind of it does it scares you a little bit, or at least makes you wish that we would be a little more serious about taking care of our planet and certainly becoming a force in space to actually keep ourselves from the worst kinds of destruction that could come our way.
yeah. I was pretty pragmatic about it too. I used to say I was absolutely for space exploration because if you have a nuclear war and lose a planet or two, it's okay. You've got more. I was being deliberately like snide about it at the time, but it underlying it was kind of a real thing. We had this awesome power to destroy the planet many, many times over. What's the point if you don't have more than one planet that we all happen to share? What's the deal? So I was a big science fiction fan too. So
Hmm.
not just science, but science fiction and stuff like that. Star Trek, big, huge Star Trek geek. Um, and the really hard literary science fiction, people like Asimov and Arthur Clarke and things like that, which only, again, fed that anxiety about end of the world.
Yeah.
So then we get to high school. Hmm. High school. I found my way. I was interested in a girl, basically what it came down to. I'm not proud of this because my mom's still alive. I think she turns 80. No, she's not that old. She turns 80 next year. And if I were still on speaking terms with her, if this girl's name came up, she would still give me a hard time about her. It's just the one girlfriend I had that she just absolutely thought was not worth my time. And for the record, she was right in retrospect. But at the time, you can't tell a kid that who's, adolescent and with all the hormones and everything like that. And she was a Jehovah's Witness. So guess what I did next, kids? So I joined Jehovah's Witnesses. And I actually took to it really well. I was just like, yes, finally. Because if you don't know, Jehovah's Witnesses really do have an interesting way of approaching the Bible. Now, on the one hand, yes, they have their own translation of the Bible and it's problematic. Okay, yeah, I get that. But quite apart from that, they have an interesting way of dealing with it that comes across as very intellectual and very scholarly and studious if you don't know what you're doing, as I did.
Yeah.
So I thought, yeah, but what I did know was that they were actually reading the verses and said, oh, really? The Bible never says this. Oh, or the Bible says specifically this. Why are we not doing this? That sort of thing. So there's a lot of things that they do. And so at the time, that was very attractive to me. The problem came in, as I mentioned, I was born into a Catholic household. And the way Catholics are, despite what the religion says, despite what the church says, the way Catholics are is like, well, if you don't believe in everything the Catholic Church says, still fine. You still go to church, you still do your thing. You just confess if you didn't do this, or if you don't particularly feel bad about it, don't. That's kind of it. So I figured, when they were telling me about, I forget what it was. Oh, I know what it was. It was about, there was something about evolution. Now, it's unclear. At the time, they were young Earth creationists, okay? But not for the reason that most Protestant, like evangelical groups are. They weren't into going back, following the genealogies and calculating the lifespans and things like that. They were more about the 6 days of creation were actually 6,000 years, because a day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is one day from that verse. So
Hmm.
they took that, and that's how they get the age of the earth. Now, they've changed since then because I've seen other people who are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and giving their stories, and they said that, well, no, somebody apparently they believe that the earth is older than that, but mankind was only created 6,000 years ago. And I was kind of like, but they said they also have some other beliefs with that. It's like, okay, animals didn't eat each other back then. It wasn't until the fall of man that everything went, well, I would say to hell, but they don't believe in a hell. Um, so, and I was just like, oh, well, that's nonsense. I said, but it's not a big deal if I don't believe it. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses are a different kind of group. They do want you to believe everything. And I was about a year into this, year and a half, maybe even 2 years. I only lasted 2 years with this group. So once the stuff started coming in, it was kind of like, really? I mean, it's so wrong. Mind you, I've already had a good 10 years of reading science books and learning science and being really into it. And then there was the Dungeons and Dragons. This was late 70s. So it's kind of like the precursor to the 80s satanic panic. Um, and they were like, no, you cannot play Dungeons and Dragons anymore. And I'm like, well, why on earth not? And they were just like, well, because you're gonna, you can get demon possessed and stuff like that. It's like, it's a make believe game. You can't. I think that the founder Gary Gygax said you can no more control get in touch with the spirit world playing Dungeons and Dragons than you can control real estate in Atlantic City by playing Monopoly. And but they were really interested, and I just basically was like walked away shaking my head. I was just like, well, that was terrible. And so after that, I mean, I kind of was marginally a believer, but I didn't really, I mean, I explored I went to a Quaker school for 1 year, and I was really into Quakerism. I liked their idea that you didn't need an intercessor between you and God and stuff like that. They call it the inner light. And it's also why they're pacifists, because they believe if you believe someone else, you're killing part of that spirit that God gave you. And I really found that attractive. I liked the meetings that we had to go to meetings because it was a religious school, but it's not like they said, you had to go to a 2 hour hellfire and damnation speech or anything like that. It was very chill. And if anybody's ever been to a Quaker meeting, they basically it's just sitting in silence for 45 minutes. And there's no official well, there's a beginning, and then there's an official end is basically two people stand up and shake hands, and then everybody else shakes hands, and then it's over. During that silence, you can, if something comes to your mind, you stand up and you speak it, and then you sit down. And Quakers believe that everything that's said in that context is an inspiration from God. And of course, when you're in a school, especially some of the younger kids, they'll just get up and say something and start giggling and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's a pretty chill kind of way to do things.
Mm.
But I still had all that anxiety, and so I never lost that. And it wasn't until later years, after going to college for a couple of years, I wasn't religious. I wasn't anti-religious, but I was anti. There was a group on campus. I went to school in Virginia. We started a D&D club. And so they lost their minds. It's a Methodist college. And there was a lot of the people, we called them the God Squad. And so we kind of really leaned into the whole let's annoy the God Squad vibe, even though some of us were believers. One of my best friends who was in the group with me was a devout Catholic. I mean, maybe that doesn't count, but they would probably say something like, well, at least he's Christian, that sort of thing. But some of us were religious, some of us weren't. Some of us were Christians, some of us were Jews, some of us, like myself, really didn't have a label. And so there was a lot of that. There was a lot of skepticism. That's when I really started getting into the skepticism. And when I was like, okay, you're going to tell me this, now I'm going to start looking it up because I have pretty decent library skills because I was an AV in library. I was a library aide in school. Mea culpa. I'm that guy. I was the AV geek. All of that. So then after I left college, and for many many reasons, I lost a very dear friend. Took his own life, and was going through a lot of the same things I was. And I resolved at that time, the neighborhood I grew up in was not great. It was a lot of violence, a lot of drugs, a lot of poverty, a lot of people in and out of prisons. And again, late 70s, early 80s wasn't really, mid 80s wasn't even really. Weren't a lot of resources. There wasn't a lot of societal concern for people. It's like once you're arrested, well, you chose your own thing. This is before it really became widely known that it's kind of a societal thing. The idea of retributive justice rather than restorative justice was not a was that retributive was the paradigm of the day.
Mm.
And so I decided at that point to do something kind of radical. Somebody, this former pacifist, this former conscientious objector and everything. I decided all at once to join the Air Force. And my dad was hesitantly proud. He was kind of like, well, part of he was very proud of me, but he was also, where did this come from? Now I come from a long line of Army brats, going back many centuries, as far as I can tell. And my father, in fact, is the only one of the three boys in his family. He's the only one that didn't join the Army. So, my grandfather served in World War II. My great grandfathers, my great granduncles, they all served in World War I over in Italy. Of course, we all know how well they did in World War I, but let that pass. So, and back it goes. So I'm kind of like restoring the family line and everything. And that's when I met some people in my second year in the Air Force who were neo-pagans, who were Wiccans.
Mm.
And that was really a homecoming for me. That really, really felt like home. Partly because the poetry of these ancient rituals and folk magic traditions, they're very beautiful. The other thing is the attraction to me of neo-paganism was really a weak or very, very fuzzy theology, such as it was. I mean, there was no one orthodoxy. I mean, there are people who are really, really kind of like, you're not really Wiccan if you don't do this, that kind of thing. There's always going to be people like that. But the most people in most circumstances are pretty open about, even if you don't believe in the literal existence of gods and goddesses, you think they're just archetypes or even just psychological shortcuts that you can use to kind of, get in touch with your subconscious or whatever. It's like whatever it is, most people are pretty much open to it. And there's room for a lot of skepticism. So I really felt at home there. But my skepticism started eroding every single belief that I had until I realized that this is relatively recent, about anywhere somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago, when I just thought, you know what? I'm an atheist. I just am. I'm pretty much I'm a naturalist too. I mean, about the existence of a God, I'll call myself an agnostic. I mean, I'm pretty sure the God is described in any of the three major religious texts, the Hebrew scriptures, the New Testament, and all the other ones that are adjacent to the Abrahamic faith. That God absolutely does not exist.
Yeah.
If you can even I mean, you can't really put a coherent picture together of a God from those books without a whole lot of renegotiating. But whatever you do, it's just all, yeah, that's not it. So, but I do keep open. It's like, all right, there may be something that we don't understand yet, but whatever it is, it's got to be pretty much natural, even though I can't really prove that. So, but I really resisted calling myself atheist because this is around the time the new atheists were come around, and I was quite frankly really turned off by them,
Mm.
even as I secretly loved and agreed with. It's like Chris Hitchens and Richard Dawkins were the two that I was really enamored with these guys, but I really hated the way they came across. I was just like, not me. I mean, I realize now that, I mean, I would totally be that. I have a spicy side to my character, and I would totally be that. But I was always trying to move away from that because it got in the way of your social life if you were that way all the time. So
Yeah.
I
In
didn't,
terms of
I
like
yeah,
this snark against the Christian worldview.
yeah, yeah, and because I thought that snark wasn't really necessary. Because what I landed on is like, I don't care what if I know somebody, I don't care what they profess to believe. I find that irrelevant in most cases. I mean, it's like, okay, if somebody says, for instance, they're a Muslim, okay, I can pretty reliably say that, don't feed them pork, that sort of thing, don't offer them or something like that. Just things to not like outright disrespect the religion, just to be snarky. But as to whether or not they're a good person, whether they say Muslim, Christian, Jew, Buddhist, whatever, is irrelevant. There are people who are very, very devout religiously who I wouldn't trust with anything, and others who have any religion or no religion that I would literally trust with my life. So, it became like a non-issue for me.
Mm.
And after all those years of just sort of taking apart my own beliefs, just till there was literally nothing left, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to say this. Since saw the other horsemen, the other two of the four horsemen, and I really like Sam Harris. I know he's kind of problematic in some ways, but when he's kind of staying in his lane as far as the religion, I thought The End of Faith was an absolutely brilliant work. It absolutely had to be said. And then I was introduced by Dan Dennett beforehand, actually by my daughter, who was working in a computer store. She actually ended up working on his computer, and she was totally geeking out about it. I was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And she told me. I was like, "So I read." In fact, I just recently finished Breaking the Spell, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. One of those books that you could highlight the entire thing to the point where it'd be useless. Just reread the whole book. It's just every paragraph has something really, really noteworthy in there to say, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So
I
he's
was
he's
I was going to add, I'm hoping to get him on the channel at some point. I've reached out to him several times, and every time he'll email back like, I'm a little bit busy, but check back with me in 6 months and we'll see. He's done
Yeah.
it about 4 or 5 times. I think he's just overly busy, but one of these days it'll work out. But he's
Yeah,
got
no,
some
he's
great stuff to say.
yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome. And he has that kindly way about him too. He's a much more much one of my favorite quotes of his is that religion is dying. And he just basically is calling for compassion for the people who are deconstructing. It's like these are good people. These people wanted to get in, they got involved in religion because they want to help people.
Yeah.
So we should help them deal with whatever they're doing. And if their faith dies in the process, let them at least give them a place to land when that happens. So, and that's kind of, how I feel about my work in RFR,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
and things like that.
well,
So,
anybody that could pass for Santa Claus, I mean, he can't be all that bad. That's. I was just going to ask.
actually, the disciplinarian from a school around here also plays Santa Claus, and I would not want him at my party, no matter what. So,
Yeah, I was just going to say. It really is interesting to see. Like, I'm reframing how I see the atheistic cultural changes that have occurred before my time in it, because I
mhm,
wasn't aware of it. I would just, my exposure to Hitchens is I'll watch some really cool YouTube video where he says some really profound things, or that one where you see them all sitting around smoking in a flat somewhere in New York City. I'm just picking up kind of the highlights, but I've learned that there's some serious concerns that some people have had with that the way that they presented themselves, including some people have brought up there was a lot of misogyny and patriarchy that was still prevalent in the new atheism movement, and I'm just completely oblivious to it. Like I had no idea, but it's really
mhm,
interesting to kind of learn about some of the issues, and it helps you to. I think it helps in a lot of ways to say just because you make one really good rational choice, meaning to say mythology as a worldview is not worth keeping,
mhm,
therefore let's ditch that and get back to reality. That doesn't mean that you can't still make some really bad choices with your thought process, and you can still
mhm,
come to some very poor conclusions. And you could also have a lot of cultural drivers that, like, a lot of us were in Christianity because we really believed it, but a lot of people are in it just because it's what they do. It'd be everybody would hate you if you left it, but like you said, they're not dangerous, they're not harmful, they're trying to love people and do their best. A lot of people, I almost get the sense that they don't really believe it, because if you think,
mhm,
if you really believed it, then you'd be out sharing the gospel with everybody to save them from hell. But you share the gospel like once a year. It's clearly not that big a deal. And when someone dies that's a Christian, you'd think that's the greatest thing ever. They just graduated to glory, but instead you're crying. Well, why are you crying? And this person just went to the best party ever. Just rejoice for them, and you'll see them in a few years anyway, right? But they're not. They're crying about it. They're sorry for their loss. Like, you don't really believe this, do you? But I think some of the realities of, like, who we are as a culture, it still gets stuck in there. And I've had a lot of people also warn me about the dynamic of saying, like, when you were a fundamentalist, everything was black and white, and you left Christianity, but you still sound as if some things are very black and white to you. And it's
yes,
realizing that your fundamentalism can still stay there even when you lose the Christianity as your worldview. That there's
mhm,
other structures that were woven into the worldview that they weren't falling under the label of Jesus or Yahweh or salvation or sanctification, but they were falling under these other categories of, like I said, black and white and so forth. And your pendulum can swing so far without you knowing it, and you're like, wow, I'm doing the same thing again under a different name. And it's really interesting to see that. And I think it behooves us to say self-examination is still very much the name of the game. We needed to examine our Christian worldview for so long. Now you still need to examine what you're thinking through, even as an atheist.
right. Yeah, it's not an instant win ticket, basically. And that's one of the reasons why I really resist it, and I kind of still resist the label atheist, because it's not the sum total of who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, religiously, I'm a humanist, okay, or philosophically, however you want to put that. Metaphysically, I consider myself a naturalist. And just to me, atheism is just sort of a byproduct of the rest of that.
Yeah.
It's just it's a byproduct of my rational my rational kind of view of the world and my naturalistic view of nature and everything around me. So I don't like atheists because it really doesn't say anything about me. And because of the new atheist movement too, there were a lot of negative stereotypes even before them. I'm not blaming the new atheists for that, but there was always this attitude. But really, it was a lot of old white-haired men,
Yeah.
basically, is what it came down to. And that's one of the things that I I really, I'm finding myself moving away from. It's like I love doing the ambassador work for RFR, but I like to get to more diverse settings. Like for instance, I'm doing an ambassador gig the end of this month. I guess we're recording in March for anybody who doesn't know. The end of this month, the American Atheist Convention is going to be in Philadelphia. And so I'm going there in my capacity as an ambassador for RFR, and I'm going to have a great time and everything like that. And I do support the organization and what it does, um, but it's what I call a home team event. I'm not, I'm not. These people aren't coming up to the table that we have asking questions about, well, I have this problem, who can I talk to and things like that. And I would not talk to them there because I'm there representing at that point. But I would say, hey, here's this number, here's this chat, here's this resource page, whatever. But if you're at the home team event, you're asking different questions. You're like, hey, if you like us, you can volunteer, you can help us, that sort of thing. So we do get a lot of things that way. And people who are therapists, RFR also does a secular therapy project, which basically vets therapists to make sure that they're using science-based methods. They're not going to try to help you like, oh, you're feeling same-sex attraction, just pray harder or just read the Bible. They're doing real science. They're not going to try to, realign your chakras with crystals or anything, any nonsense like that. So, but getting out and among the populace, as diverse as it is as far as religious opinions go, is to me much more important work than strengthening my own network within the this movement. So yeah, it's but I'm looking forward to it. But again, it's not where I want to like focus most of my attention.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing that was helpful to me too, I recently interviewed Bart Campolo, and he was talking about how he got a bit turned off when he first got really plugged into atheist conventions and meetings and so forth, because it was just everybody constantly saying, we're not that, we're not that, we're not that. And he's like, all you're really saying is what you're not, and you're complaining and frustrated at how you were deceived and you've wasted your life and you've lost time. Like, granted, there's a time to be an angry atheist for a little bit,
Oh, absolutely.
grieve the process. But then it's like, but nobody was saying, but now that we're free, this is our beautiful, we're going to create a beautiful passion and a beautiful project. And it just, we're going to celebrate our lives and do something amazing with them. He's like, I don't see you guys doing something amazing with your lives. You're just sitting around talking about what you don't believe. And it was really a good kind of sort of a punch to the gut to me of like saying, what are you really doing with your life? Like, are you just saying what you did, what you escaped from, or are you on a journey to something? Yeah, yes, that was part of your journey, was escaping, but that's not the end of the story. There's a journey to somewhere else, and the journey, of course, is to help other people escape, but also to rationality, to making our society hopefully a much better and safer place for people, loving people, and helping people heal. But there's a much bigger piece here than just I'm not that anymore. And it was a
Right.
good reminder, really good reminder to me that we have to be about something much more beautiful than just our past.
Yeah, absolutely. And that there is this kind of, I mean, yeah, there is a kind of contrary thing, and it's very natural. And a lot of people are really traumatized by a lot of these beliefs and finding out that they were lied to, whether in a doctrinal way or more frequently in a practical way. When, for instance, a sex scandal is covered up, and an abuser was just reassigned rather than facing any real consequences and things like that. I mean, those are things that really these religious organizations have no one but themselves to blame about. And the fact that people are angry about it, well, yeah, of course they're angry. I mean, trauma is bad enough, but to have somebody stand by and blame you for what's happened to you and things like that, which happens a ton in religions, let's not mince words here. Blaming the victim is kind of a full-time league sport in organized religions. So and things like that. But that's one of the reasons why I joined RFR. Kind of segues into that because I was supporting a lot of organizations. Now, I have an RFRX talk, which is up on the Recovering from Religion site on autism and deconstruction. I'm on the autistic spectrum. I was diagnosed in 1951. So those pins that we put in didn't get along with my peers and, really liked the truth and wanted to get to it and just sort of assumed that if they say X, Y, and Z, they mean X, Y, and Z. They don't mean, well, we say that, but it's kind of like, no, 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 no. Either it is or it isn't. You have to, I understand things get crazy no matter how hard you are, but you have to stand firm on these values or just not even say that you hold them. End of story. So that's it's kind of a black and white thinking, but I think of it more just demanding a sort of a radical or radical honesty, radical candor. I learned that in a seminar on communication. I love it. This idea of radical candor. You're not being like belligerent, you're not being hurtful, but you are being as honest as is necessary for the situation. And I love that. So I was involved in the Autistic Self Advocacy Network, which is one of many organizations that actually has autistic people in it. There's a certain other group, which is a major organization that does tons of fundraising, but none of that goes to help autistic people. And they have no people who are autistic on their ruling board at all.
Hmm.
They tend to they are really horrible in that they play up the victim card with the parents, and they say, "Oh yes, isn't it so sad? You have to have this burden put on you in addition to having a child," and that's just that beyond being disrespectful, it's very harmful in the long terms. And they've also engaged in historically have engaged in things like vaccine hesitancy and bought into the whole vaccines causing autism myth and things like that. So, and I'm really, in fact, I'm still kind of this way, even in the atheist community. Atheists are awful at history, absolutely crap. There's a lot of things. How many times have you seen that, oh, Christmas is really a pagan festival? No, not. If you really know the history, oh, Christmas trees were these prehistoric pagan symbols. No, they know exactly when Christmas trees start, well, more or less, within a century. It was like a 14th century Christian invention. And, there's documents and everything like that. There's no records of it. The only records that they have are people writing after the fact and saying, oh, yeah, this was the case. And strangely enough, a lot of these beliefs, which I know a lot of atheists or at least previously religious people hold, actually come from a mid-19th century pamphlet written by a fundamentalist who is going on an anti-papist rant against Catholics and Catholicism. So he made all of this stuff up. He had no sources whatsoever. He just said, this is this and this is this. And it's funny because this is just as bad as anything else fundamentalists have written, which is absolutely not grounded in any kind of fact. And yet you see atheists lapping this stuff up. Why? Because it's very much the what's the word I'm looking for? It's very much it's part of the narrative, and it feeds into that hate. And I don't want to, I don't want people to. I mean, there's time for the 2 minutes hate, and it's fine, but try to keep it private. Don't make it the only thing about you. Never. I never like to make my personality about one thing, and maybe I take it to a pathological. And okay, I'm a film composer and I work in IT and I'm doing RFR, and so I'm doing all these things. It's like, okay, maybe I'm a little pathological about it, but still, I don't think anybody is that, and nobody's that one-dimensional, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I think people who do that kind of sell themselves short, because there's so much more to people. But you really, if you're going to claim the label skeptic, you got to be skeptical about everything, most especially about what you believe. Even as a skeptic, I believed a bunch of stuff that I discovered was just flat out wrong about history, about the Bible, about religion. You have to be able to be corrected. And if the problem is so bad, there's actually a channel called History for Atheists that tackles a lot of this nonsense, misconceptions about what Galileo's fate was and what he was actually in trouble for. And it's about Giordano Bruno being a martyr for science. Well, no, Giordano Bruno was a religious nutcase. And no, he shouldn't have been burnt by the Inquisition. He absolutely should not have been burnt for his beliefs, but he was just guessing. He had all kinds of religious beliefs why he thought there were other worlds whirling around other stars and things like that. He was wrong about just about everything, but like a broken clock, he got it right once, and everybody takes him as like, no, he wasn't a scientist. He was just one of those medieval people who just believed a lot of weird things. But then again, so was Sir Isaac Newton. And he came up with some, well, he was a lot more educated to that particular way and things like that. But yeah,
it's interesting to bring up those names, because I've seen, if I'm not mistaken, I've seen those names mentioned in the Cosmos series with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they talk about those characters.
Yeah, he's actually one of the ones that just, I mean, I think he just perpetrates them, and understanding that Cosmos, for instance, he didn't write Cosmos. That was Andrewian was the primary writer of that. And but not an uneducated person herself. She's really good science communicator, really good, skeptical person and things like that. But there we all have our blind spots, and history just happens to be a very common one in the skeptics community. I'm not even going to say atheism, because I mean, not everybody who's a skeptic is an atheist, and a lot of people that like, I have a lot of friends who, including like my probably my closest friend in the world, and he's quite the devout Christian. He's having a hard time with it right now because his church went hard right in 2016 unexpectedly, which really disappointed him. But he left that. But he still maintains his faith, and and it's funny because when we met, I was a Jehovah's Witness, and he was a registered member of Anton Sandor LaVey's Church of Satan.
Mm.
It's like so, our friendship is pretty resilient from the beginning.
Yeah, it's quite the journey. Can I ask real quick, going back to the autism topic for a second?
Sure.
Is it, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard someone else say, and this is like, I truly have not researched this, so pardon me if I'm way off on this, but I've heard some people, at least one person, I think someone else said this, that autistic people tend to be more skeptical in general, and that autistic people have a harder time staying or becoming Christians. Is there any truth to that dynamic? And do you think that there's something different in the way their brain, perceives information, and even cultural dynamics and worldview issues, where they just see the disconnects and the non sequiturs easier than everyone else?
Um, that's an interesting question. First of all, I want to preface this by saying that there's a saying in the autistic community that if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. There is no kind of autistic thing. I mean, the current thinking is there's something like 120 different genetic variations which are associated in some combination with each other. So there are, I don't know, somebody better at math than I can do the math. It's like how many what kind of geometric progression that represents, but it's a lot. So the lot is not new. And there's still debate as to where the spectrum lives, and there's still, it's an open topic, to the point where I was diagnosed about 10 years ago. And I was talking to the psychologist who did my thing when I said, oh yeah, well, this and this and this. He goes, oh yeah, they thought that back when you were diagnosed. I'm like, at the time, this conversation, I'm like, back when I was diagnosed, that was 9 years before we were having this conversation. So that's how fast the science is changing. There's just a lot more research being done. For instance, when I was diagnosed, the estimate was 1 in 68 people, at least in the United States, were autistic. Now it's 1 in 34, maybe 37. I'm not. So 1 in 30 something. So it's much more prevalent than we previously thought. As diagnostic criteria get better, as hopefully the stigma gets, worn away from it. But to answer your question, the primary thing that really comes closest to defining autism is this idea of not picking up on social cues that other people just seem to do instinctively. Now, many of us, myself included, we are able to intellectualize the process and start reading cues and then say, oh, okay, well, this has happened, so now this is my response and this is how I'm supposed to react, both verbally, and some of us can control our body language to a certain extent. I've never been able to do that. So we can do that, but it's an intellectual process. It's a process we call in the autism community masking, and we all mask. Everybody masks to a certain extent. You don't want to say what's on your mind in front of your boss all the time, because it would sometimes be a very career-limiting move. But the pressure for people on the spectrum to actually conform to this is very high in society as a whole. I have an hypothesis that I would love to be able to have the credentials to do research on, but I don't think it's realistic that I would by the end of my life. It's not impossible, but right now not in the cards. I believe that a lot of the function of religion is social. That's not very controversial, but I really believe that most of what is involved in religion is social. It's social interaction, it's social expectation, and meeting those expectations, regardless of what it is on a doctrinal basis, on a larger basis. Of course, that's all kind of a given. What's not a given is how you act towards people, after church on Sundays, or at socials, or at Bible study groups, and things like that. And if you have a child who's on the spectrum, they're going to have difficulty picking up on that and responding appropriately, and that's going to be the bigger deal. And so that's a very long way of saying, yes, absolutely, I think that's what it is. It's because of that social aspect that's so difficult or near impossible for a lot of people on the spectrum that Um, that gets framed by religion as a spiritual problem, and or a disciplinary problem more often than not, and that's obviously very traumatizing and very ill-informed, and it's something that religions don't deal well with at all. Um, you know, Mental illness certainly don't. People, their attitude towards depression, things like depression, and seeking medication for them and things like that is horrible and unhealthy and unhelpful. But the way an autistic child will be punishable, because again, they're very much into the retributive justice thing, and that is the worst thing you could do, regardless of what you think about punishing children in general. Punishing an autistic child for basically being autistic is just horrible and unhelpful. It is a neurological level condition, all evidence points to.
Yeah.
And it's not something your child is doing to be difficult, and it's not something that's being, they're not testing their boundaries or challenging your authority, which is how it gets framed a lot and stuff like that. But yeah, that's very difficult, because if you tell an autistic child, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself, and you see people not doing that all around you, it's hard not to call that out. It's hard not to say, but wait, that's not fair, because there's a sense of fairness that a lot of us are really, really into. And when we see something that is just very hypocritical, especially, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's really obvious. So, yeah.
Hmm.
So a long
So
way of saying, yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
I would be curious if that would correlate even as far as just the general nature of the Yahweh character, where they would, autistic people would say, like, and a lot of us that tell our stories on this channel, we go down this route quite a bit of saying we were really kind of awestruck with God, like, God is our Father, He's our loving Father, He cares about us. And then we look at this the descriptions in the Old Testament, and you say, how is He a loving Father? He tells His own children, the Israelites, that I will, if you obey me, I'll bless you, but if you don't obey me, I'm going to curse you so bad that I'll make you so hungry you'll eat your own children, and I will metaphorically take you out in front of your enemies and lift your skirt up and show them your nakedness. I mean, He's just horrible stuff. He tells people to kill everybody, but take the young girls for child brides or worse. And it's like, wait a second, the discrepancy and the fairness factor, the justice of, like, is God slow to wrath? Is He slow to anger? Is He truly loving? Does perfect love cast out fear, like First John says? Well, if He's perfectly loving, He's not casting out fear. He's throwing fear in everybody's faces. He's saying, I will get you in this life, and I'll definitely get you in the one to come. It's like, wait a second. Do you think some autistic people see the character of Yahweh and just say, there's just no way. He's this doesn't add up.
That could be, but also if they're doing what a lot of fundamentalists and conservative religious people do, and actually reading their Bibles, they're going to see problems, because they're going to see, for instance, in the book of Jeremiah, God seems to be one way. And you go to like a book like Amos or Joel or something like that, which most people don't quote from very tellingly, they seem more interested in, and I may get called on this because I may get the names of the books wrong, because I'm not as well versed as a lot of people are on this, but certain other prophets, let's say, of the Hebrew scriptures, really emphasize the social aspects, the social justice aspects of Yahweh, saying that, oh, He cares for the poor and the orphans and the widows and, the most vulnerable in Near Eastern society and things like that. And that seems to be the main focus, that, Yahweh is actually mad at people for not treating their vulnerable well. And that's why you can get these cross narratives about Jesus in the New Testament and stuff like that. If you look at, you look at Jesus through the Gospels, especially the Synoptic Gospels, he's, really preaching a lot of tolerance and stuff like that. Now, why he's doing that, he's apocalyptic. He thinks the world's going to end. None of the crap that we fight over is going to matter anyway. But the point is, he's saying these very progressive sounding things, but he's also quoting the Old Testament. I really don't like that whole, oh, the God of the New Testament is loving and the God of the Old Testament is right. I was like, there's some really loving stuff in the Old Testament, and there's some really, the New Testament writers are quoting the Hebrew scriptures all the time. And then when you look at, Bart Ehrman did a really, really good essay on Jesus in Revelation versus Jesus in the Gospels. They're very different characters. The word love doesn't even appear in the book of Revelation, at least not in connection with like with what Jesus is supposed to be doing. It's all, it's all wrath and vengeance and retribution and, killing your enemies and humiliate them in the worst possible way, and literally essaying, somebody who's supposed to represent, the whore of Babylon, as it's put, and everything like that, or Jezebel, whichever one those two are. It's all prophetic language, and it kind of gets messed up. I usually have my study Bible in front of me, but I don't want to go flipping through it because that's not what we're here for. But the I do have the book, by the way. It is right in front of me, but I'm not going to interrupt this conversation for that. But yeah, but it's almost like you read that book. It's like a lot of modern days fundamentalists and Christians will read the book of Revelation and then decide that's Jesus, and then they impose that view on every other reference to Jesus that they see.
Yeah.
Then they'll focus on verses like "I come not to bring peace but a sword," and things like that. Whereas if you take the love message, the Revelation thing almost becomes irrelevant because it's kind of like, well, somebody understands what this means, but that person's not me, kind of thing. So you reframe it that way. So that's just it. The inconsistency will definitely stick out to an autistic child who has, the ability to read and formulate and verbalize thoughts, whether it's through mouth parts or through other technologies. Not everybody is. I hesitate to say verbal, but not everybody is able to speak on the spectrum, but they can do other things. For instance, use picture boards and other, typewriters and other assistive technologies to do that.
Mm.
So yeah, it's definitely something that would not go unnoticed to somebody who's on the spectrum. And
Yeah.
again, this is a general statement, it may not be true of everybody, but certainly it's one of the more common attributes that we see.
Now, when you got to the point where you were able in your journey to say, I definitely am not a believer in these religions,
Mhm.
was that was there any trauma for you in terms of like wanting to have gone to heaven when you died, or just feeling like you've got this father that's looking down on you in love that suddenly he's like, I guess he's not there, never been there. Like
Mhm.
what kind of pain did you go through to leave Christianity and these other religions, or did you feel like it was so slow with your process that by the time you admitted you were out, it was you'd kind of already done your grieving along the way?
I really think that last one is it, with the possible exception of, okay, I remember very distinctly. I have memories going back till I was like 3 or 4 years old. It's Call it a curse, if you will. But I remember my mom talking to me about heaven and hell, and she's not a very good storyteller. She's intelligent in her way, but storytelling is not a her forte. And she really did a bad job of explaining it. Like, she told me that hell was a place where they stick needles in you and they make you do hard work. Well, I immediately latched onto the make you do hard work because for some reason when I was a child, I just wanted to work. I wanted to have a job like my daddy. That was like what I wanted to do. Like, ooh, they give you a job? Awesome. It's like the sticking with needles just didn't fit. So I kind of, like a lot of people do, I focused on the thing that was important to me, and the other thing was just like, maybe, I don't know. But then she said heaven was a place where you could have all the ice cream you want. Well, I mean, I liked ice cream, but it wasn't my favorite thing in the world. So it kind of seemed like she undersold it and she kind of oversold hell. I never really had a fear of hell growing up. I did have a fear of demons and possession well into high school. But most of my fear was about end of the world stuff because I feared that long before I had any religious idea that oh, this is going to happen. Oh, and here's why it's going to happen. So just kind of feeding into that. So, but the fear was already there. So probably I really didn't have like huge hopes for heaven at all, especially since my last Christian religion was Jehovah's Witnesses. And they really didn't believe in a heaven; they just believed in a restored earth, which, quite frankly, I'd be happy with. And that is the view of the of ancient Judaism. Those whose were apocalypticists was basically like, okay, yeah, it's not heaven that's going to be our eternity. Our eternity is going to be a rebuilt earth. Oh, that'd be awesome if that could happen.
Yeah.
But losing losing the religious justification of my anxiety really helped me get over my anxieties in general. I mean, I was literally pathologically anxious. I was on medication for general anxiety disorder and everything, and a lot of that anxiety focused on this kind of end of the world stuff. Like 9/11 happened, I was like, I was, this is it. This is, and it wasn't for any religious reasons. I was just like, this is it. The whole world's going to go to hell, figuratively. I didn't literally say that, but, society is going to break down. You're going to be in this, dystopic future kind of thing, because I read a lot of dystopic novels when I was a kid. So, and as an adult. So, yeah. So that was really that. It was the death of 1,000 paper cuts in a way, but it was really when I left, when I started actually taking my anxiety seriously and going to therapy and being open to medication and going through that. And I'm off medication now, but being able to overcome that lifelong crippling anxiety really was started by giving up the religious justification that was basically constantly saying, yes, this is going to happen. You're right to be afraid of it. And we're the only hope against it. I never bought "We Are the Only Hope Against It," but I still, even after I left Christianity, I still believed, even when I was a neo-pagan, when I was a Wiccan, I still believed in the that everything was going to fall apart. Not for religious reasons, but just that it was. And here we are in 2024. It's kind of still there, but I mean, so far the anxiety is not too high. But yeah, but I mean, that's it's but yeah, it wasn't really as I probably was traumatized. I mean, I certainly was traumatized by some of the stuff that happened when I was in the Jehovah's Witnesses.
The
um
comment about from your mom about getting shots in hell, like a doctor is giving you shots, right?
no, just sticking needles in you, just literally
Okay.
stick, not giving you shots, but sticking you, because she knew that I hated needles.
Hmm.
And
That I've
because
never
I
heard that before, but I guess it's the concept of whatever your worst fear is, hell's going to be it. But that's
yeah,
really
exactly.
kind of sadistic. I've never heard it taken. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess hellfire is just as sadistic in one sense, but that's just it's like why give your kid nightmares and heaven
Well,
being full of ice cream. I guess I could see that, but that is definitely a different take on it. I've never heard that before.
yeah, I just think she just had a really hard time relating it to anything that I liked, really, because being autistic, I didn't really express. I expressed strong likes about things, but nothing there's no sort of general thing that she was aware of. I mean, there were things, but she really wasn't aware of a lot of them.
Mm. For
But it
my
is very much, she did know that I was afraid of needles, though, because of, every time I went to the doctor, it was absolutely traumatic for me, no matter, from a very young age. It was only actually about 15, 20 years ago when I finally got over my fear of needles,
mm,
um, which was,
it's
it was good because now I don't go through trauma every time I go to the doctors to have to get a vaccination or something. So,
I had the same exact thing. I got a lot of allergy shots as a kid, and I always hated them. But at a certain point, it just clicked that this is very short term pain, and it's for your good. So I got
yeah,
over
yeah.
it. I was going to say it's interesting to hear too, just the general sense that your mom seemed to try to give you, and I've heard other people do something like that, maybe less sadistically, but of hell is just this place of torture, and heaven is this place of wonderful delights forever. I certainly got that, but it was interesting. The contrast for me was there was in addition to stuff like heaven will be delightful and wonderful and no pain, of course, no
Mhm.
tears, but it was also very much about the character of God versus the character of our sinfulness. Like hell was seen as a place of torture, but it was also seen as a place where it was described a lot in church and in different sermons I heard and books I read is hell is a place where your sin is basically gonna come to full fruition. In other words,
Mhm.
the worst part of hell isn't going to be the flames. The worst part of hell is going to be the fact that your sin is going to turn you into a monster. And if the flames stopped in a moment, you would still be absolutely consumed with your selfishness, with your self-centeredness, with your flesh, with your carnality, and the fact that you basically are the worst parts of you are going to come out. In other words, if you're the kind of person that in life you maybe were a bit of a bully and you just wanted
Mhm.
to punch people, well, in hell you're going to just want to literally tear everybody from limb to limb and murder everybody. If you are the kind of person that occasionally like to curse, in hell, it's just going to be F bombs everywhere. Like you're going to be the worst version of you.
Mhm.
Everything about you is going to become worse, including how you even treat yourself. So without the hell flames, you're still going to kind of suffocate yourself. You're going to collapse in on yourself. And the opposite, of course, was true of heaven. Heaven was where the angelic and the beautiful part of you that God had kind of put in seed form in the garden, and then he kind of was going to bring it to full fruition through the glorious story of salvation with the gospel, what Christ had done for you positionally at the cross, and then also the fact that he was going to glorify you and take this beautiful seed from the Garden of Eden of who you could have been this whole time. He's just going to put it on blast. You're going to be the best version of you that's ever possible. You're going to
Mm,
kind of be like an angel and kind of like God. I mean, it talks about, when we see God, when we see Christ, we'll be like him. And so
mm,
and then that was the contrast. It wasn't just the fear versus the pleasure. It was, do you want to become a monster or do you want to become like an angel, like the very best, beautiful version of yourself?
mm,
And that to me was, of course, I was enraptured with that mentality because I was like, of course, I don't want to become a monster. I don't want to be the kind of person that's just a hideous caricature of myself. I want to become the very best. And that was my biggest driver, I would say, besides because I honestly didn't have too much fear of hell. I knew I believed and but I knew hell was real. But I was just afraid, even as a Christian, thinking like, why would you want to entertain sin? That's the path that would have led you as an unbeliever in the afterlife to become the worst part of your nightmares. Not in
mm,
terms of what you would happen to you, but of what you would become. So fight sin, not just because it's bad and it cost Christ his life on the cross, but because that's not where your future is against sin. Your future is purity and holiness. So
mm,
go for what you're going to be. You're going to become that. Like God's going to put you through sanctification anyway. You're going to become a beautiful person because he has truly saved you. So why
mm.
fight where he's this beautiful picture that he's where he's taken you? And that helped me a lot to in my Christian life, of course, to stay on the path. But obviously, none of it's real. But
Well, that's interesting that you said that because I've never really had that sophisticated a view of the two things. To me, especially, and this outlasted my Christian phase. I was not a Christian when I left for the Air Force, but I remember thinking hell for me would basically be this torment of my anxiety with no way out of it, where even sleep didn't, like basically a never-ending nightmare. Not actual harm, but just the constant threat of it. That would be like, because that's what anxiety is like.
yeah. Hmm.
And your story actually reminds me of there's an ancient Greek story from around the time of, around the biblical times where there's a guy who was totally rich and he was very rich in his life and he really loved the rich life. And when he came to the river Styx, he obviously was kept on arguing for taking stuff with him. And so to someone where I want to say Charon or somebody at the gate there was basically asking the other people waiting to go cross the river Styx to basically say, okay, what should we punish this person for doing? Because he's obviously such an insufferable, selfish person. And basically, what he ended up doing is usually when you went to the realm of the dead, what they did was they let you drink from the river, which would immediately make you forget your previous life. And what they did was this guy, they didn't let him drink from forgetfulness. They made him remember everything and just live out eternity, just wanting what he could no longer have.
Hmm.
And so that reminded me of that story that you were telling me about basically being tortured by what you yourself have made, what you've made yourself and things like that. So, and that's the story that came from around the time that Christians were starting to adopt these Greco-Roman ideals about what the afterlife was like was that that there was a place of torment and stuff like that. It was happening in Judaism. It was also happening. It was also this concept in Greco-Roman religion, and I think this comes from Bart Ehrman's book Heaven and Hell, where he talks about that specific particular story. But that's where those concepts came in, because up
Hmm.
until about 200 years before Jesus was born, I the basically Judaism really didn't have a sense of like a punishment or reward after death until then. And it also reminds me of the stories that they tell. Like there's a non-canonical book called The Apocalypse of Peter, which describes heaven and hell, where Peter is given a tour of heaven and hell. And of course, the heaven part is kind of boring and short because how many times can you say how wonderful something is? But the really garish and lurid details are given in the description of hell. And it's very much, if you were women who tempted men with your hair, you were hung by your braids over fire. If you were a man who submitted to these women, you are hung by some other part of you over the flames. So not only are you hanging from your bits, you are hanging over flames and stuff like that. There seemed like this cottage industry of just creating garish details to like it's almost laughable, except the fact that so many people take it seriously. So,
So
but yeah, that's it.
sadistic.
But to me, it was very much like that. The whole idea of just a nightmare you could never wake up from, and even if you were to kill yourself, well, you're already dead, so that doesn't work. So, and it also reminds
Mm,
me of a book by there's a story by Harlan Ellison called "I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream." And it's about a computer, what we would call an AI, gaining not only full self-awareness but omnipotence. And it decides that since it has no
mm,
mouth and feels like it has to scream, it's going to torture the remaining humans for all eternity. And if you kill yourself, the computer will just bring you back to life and torture you some more.
mm,
So, that's probably a side swipe at religion and the concept of hell, because Harlan Ellison was very cynical like that. But it's also kind of an interesting idea that that was exactly what my anxiety was, and I didn't read that story until many years after I had similar anxieties.
mm,
That to me would have been hell, and wouldn't matter if I was a Christian or not. I would still believe that that was what there was like. Oh, there's still this possibility that this will happen. So hell was easy for me to believe in
mm.
because again of my anxiety. But the idea of heaven just seemed ludicrous on its face. So that probably says more about me than, than about religion itself. But except perhaps religion did a really bad job of selling paradise to me because I never bought it,
Yeah.
even at my most ardent, you
Mm.
know.
It's interesting that even though you didn't buy into it into the same fundamentalist extremist way like that I would say I did, it's interesting that they still got you with the anxiety. It's like they're going to get you. The sadistic nature of it is there. They're going to find some way to say we're going to get you for not being one of us, and
Yeah,
the
and
whole
it was
in
certainly
group out group.
culturally. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah, it's certainly culturally there. So I probably picked that up from somewhere, and it just, oh, anxiety meet hell, hell meet anxiety. I'm sure you two will have lots to say to each other. So
Exactly. Well, I was curious with all the the hard parts of this that we just touched on, as you did get to the point of sort of moving on intellectually from this and saying I'm definitely done. I've thought more than enough about this, and I don't assent. This does not reflect reality. I'm out. Once you got to that point, did you feel like there was much that you had to think through and work through, or even talk through with others about the healing process, or did you feel like at that point you were pretty much at a healthy point already? And if you did have to, get counseling or talk through it with somebody or journal yourself, like what were sort of the hardest parts of saying I'm making peace with my past?
it was really just the anxiety. And again, just disentangling the anxiety and part of the whole, thing of like, rational emotive therapy or even cognitive behavioral therapy is looking at your beliefs and seeing how they're inconsistent and looking for the inconsistencies. And yeah, a lot of that will involve, as you said in the beginning of this conversation, you leave that religion and you say, okay, I no longer believe this, but you're still kind of thinking in the same way you were when you were religious and carrying it with you in ways that you may not even realize. And so, yeah, that definitely happened, but in the process of years of therapy. And so, in that way, working through that, if I found religion yet, but again, that's when I discovered that it was always there. That anxiety was always there. Some people are just born that way, I guess, where they're very prone to anxiety, whereas certain things which most people could just let roll off their back, some people are a lot more prone to anxiety attacks. And I mean, I grew up in a very dysfunctional household. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was very much an enabler. We were always poor, and I mean poor. I don't mean lower middle class. I mean poor. I moved 8 times the first 8 years of my life, usually ahead of some kind of an eviction notice, or in one case, the place we were living was condemned. We just had to find another place. Again,
Mm,
it was the 1960s. There were no, things. Even if there were social safety nets, my father, out of a combination of pride and racism, would absolutely not take any kind of public aid or anything like that, which just basically left my mom to just sort of scramble around. And I mean, credit where it's due, she did it. We all survived, and but there was so much insecurity and everything. It's not surprising at all that I grew up the anxious mess that I was, because again, even to the point of as anybody who's grown up with an alcoholic parent knows, you never know who's coming through that door every day. And, until you do, there's just this, especially if you have something where you need to talk to that parent and you're just like, okay, is today the day? Oh, not today. Okay, back to my room, that sort of thing. There's a line from a Mountain Goat song. So this is what the volume knob is for. So, It's a great line, and it really captures that spirit of
Mm,
of growing up in that kind of really dysfunctional household and just having no choice sometimes, but just drown it out.
yeah.
So,
I didn't have alcoholism in my family, but I had a similar enough experience with my dad. He's passed now, but his anger was often through the roof. So you never knew like
mm.
what it was going to be. And if everything was calm and copacetic, it was like we looked normal. And then the next night, the screaming was off the charts, and it was very difficult to deal with. But not for
Oh,
alcohol's reason, but
and we were always told we don't need to worry about this. It's none of your business, kids. You just don't worry about it. It's like, well, when you hear your parent, when you go to sleep to your parents screaming to each other and sometimes throwing things like that, it's kind of hard to say that, oh, it's just none of your business. It's not as comforting. If it's meant to be comforting, it isn't. So yeah, there is that element of it. So yeah, there was a lot of that too, and I'm sure that played into my anxiety. But again, I think religion does that. Religion does. Daryl, the founder of RFR, says this a lot in his books. It's like religion tends to hijack things that our defense mechanisms are, but it tends to hijack them for its own purposes. And
yeah.
it's a particularly graphic case was mine, I think, with the what I'll call rapture anxiety, even though the Jehovah's Witnesses didn't call it rapture. And once I was out of religion, I still had rapture anxiety, but it was just focused in a different way. So
Mm,
there's a classic example of one of those things where we walk out, but we carry it with us. In that case, it was a lot easier to recognize because it was causing me such distress, like day and night. So that's really, I mean, I feel terrible because I've certainly met and talked to people in my work and just met people in daily life who've gone through much worse religiously than me. I was never really forced by my parents into any kind of religion. The worst, my father once said when I was a teenager, I feel like you should get some more religion in your life. And that was right before I became a Jehovah's Witness, which he definitely regretted saying that.
well, bet.
Because the conversation with my mom was just my mom just said, "Well, remember when you said he should get some religious in his life?" My dad just looked at her and went, "He didn't." She's like, "Yeah, he did." He was
Oh
just
man.
so disappointed. He was like, "Not that one." But I mean, again, this is my teenage rebellion years. What am I going to do between having the hormones in play and and be like, "Ooh, how can I get a rise out of my parents now?" sort of thing. Even it was ironic that I was that. And looking back, it was ironic that I kind of goaded my parents so often, considering how awful my childhood was. But it obviously paid some kind of dividends, because I mean, I wasn't beaten all the time. And, just sometimes I just did things like, oh, I guess because religion was considered out of
Mm,
bounds. It's like, well, if he believes this, then I guess, whatever. But then, I definitely, around holidays was big. It was like they would always take me to my grandparents for Christmas. Oh, I don't want to celebrate Christmas. Christmas is evil. Jesus never said to celebrate this. I'm not going to celebrate it. I don't want to celebrate my birthday. Blah, blah, blah. Now
mm.
that I'm in my 60s, I certainly don't want to celebrate my birthday, but it has totally different reasons.
Yeah, exactly. I do want
Don't
to ask
remind
you.
me.
I do want to ask you in a minute about your work with recovering from religion before we wrap up. But before I get
Yep.
quite to that point, I did want to just throw in one more question about your story, and certainly if there's any other parts of your story that you wanted to just draw some insights on, feel free. But I was curious how you deal with the question of nihilism, the question of how do you create meaning and purpose in your life, knowing that you don't think that you're going to be punished or rewarded in the afterlife based on what you do here, based on the fact that there's nobody that's designed your life and has kind of said, here's the best life. I've designed it this way, and if you stay on the path, I will bless you. Being that that is all nonsense and it's gone from your equation, knowing that we are evolved primates, how do you at this point find beauty and create purpose and meaning in your life? And what is like, assuming that you hopefully live a long life, hopefully we all have long many years ahead of us, like what do you want to do with the rest of your life at this point, knowing where you've come from?
Um, yeah, that basically the answer to that question is basically in what I said earlier about how I really don't judge people by what they claim to believe in. I mean, you can make some general, assumptions about them. You know, yeah, if they're religious, you could if they identify with a particular, traditional conservative Christian brand, you can kind of make some generalizations about it. But on a real kind of human level, if they're good people or not, it seems to be kind of unrelated to that. And that was the key to me. It's like, well, if it's unrelated in other people, it's unrelated in me. I mean, just because what I do doesn't have eternal significance doesn't mean it doesn't have significance or meaning to me and to the people around me. I mean, certainly, friends and people, when I get an opportunity to help, I'm sure there's good feelings there. It certainly makes me feel good. And other people who've helped me, I feel really good about that. And I hope they feel really good about having helped me. None of that has to be eternal to be true and to be beautiful. And basically, when you say how do you protect against nihilism, I totally don't. I am absolutely an optimistic nihilist. I mean, it really doesn't mean anything, but it's just easier, usually easier and cheaper to be a good person.
Yeah.
It's certainly emotionally less taxing, and you could argue that maybe we evolved that way, and I kind of think there's something to that. I think that the things there's this kind of tension between our natures as to things that keep us in groups together, and then without wanting to kill every other group that we see, that sort of thing. We just have to kind of, this sounds so hippie, but it's that we really do have to consider widen our circles quite a bit in order to take in more people and things like that, and make something for our children, our grandchildren, and everything like that. That is our legacy, not what happens to me personally after I leave this mortal coil. What if it's nothing? Okay, well, have I left the world a better place for my children and my grandchildren and for everybody else's children, by the way, not just mine, not to make it so selfish. It's like it's this is not a bad ride, and we can all make it better just by being good people. And you don't need a God to tell you that. You certainly don't need a God who on one hand tells you love thy neighbor as thyself, and on the other hand tells you, but kill them if I tell you to. You're totally I'm totally down with killing them if I think so, if I think it's all right. So
Exactly.
that's just something that's just something that yeah, no, sorry, what you're selling doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a great point. I love it. And I think it's a great, I love the phrase you said, optimistic nihilist. And just,
That's not mine. I'm just saying that there's actually a Kurzgesagt video on it called
okay.
optimistic nihilism. So, but it's definitely not my term. I don't know where it originated, but I love it. So,
Yeah. And it's been interesting for me to embrace nihilism on the one hand, but yet to kind of admit you just can't live there. And it's funny how you can philosophically say, I am this. I'm in this camp. This is definitely the best description I understand of reality, meaning that my existence, all of our existences, in one sense, don't have this transcendent meaning, at least in the framework of what we used to think of as meaning. But
mhm,
you can't live there. I mean, you can't. You could get depressed and suicidal if you dwell on that too much. Like nothing ever matters. And what if an asteroid does, you know, take away this planet in the next 50 years? Like, and it really never mattered because now there's nothing left. There's nothing of our history. There's nothing to even for future plant, future civilization from some other planet to come explore. We're just gone. Like,
mhm,
did it ever matter? And it's like, well, no, it really didn't. None of it mattered. And it's like, but you can't live there. You have to live as if what you do to lift someone up, to bless them, to help them, to feed the poor,
mhm.
to clothe them, and to help the homeless get houses, and to just bless people as much as you can. Like that matters to us, even though it
Absolutely.
ultimately doesn't matter. And it's a weird conundrum. It's a weird paradox. But I've
It,
found that if you don't live with the opportunity part of it and the optimistic part
mhm.
of it, you become kind of too self-centered, like this, let's just flip through the channels till we die. Like, nah, that's not, I don't want to become
Yeah,
a couch potato for the rest of my life.
there are a lot of people who have very deep religious beliefs who do that anyway, though. They profess faith, but they live as if they're nihilistic. So it's like I said, it really depends on, the labels don't make any sense to me. They're often very completely divorced from the person, and even where they're meaningful, they're not complete at all.
Yeah.
Um, there's a great line. It's also very anthropic centric. Oh no, how dare the universe go on without us? It's like I loved there was an episode of Mr. Deity who, if you don't know, Mr. Deity used to have like a sitcom where he plays God who's turned off his omniscience. And at one point, he's talking to somebody who is discussing how humans are going to evolve, what process he's going to use to create the humans. And he's like, well, we have this process, it takes a long time. He goes, time? He goes, and he says, I don't want to spend a whole lot, Mr. Deity says, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. I mean, humans aren't even part of my major plan. That doesn't come in until billions of years after the humans have gone the way of the dinosaurs. It's like, and that brings up a really interesting point. It's like, even if there is a God, you understand that this creature, this entity which created the trillions upon trillions of stars and the many galaxies, the worlds that are probably out there, all for our benefit? Really? Just us? That's the best that the universe can do? I mean, there's all kinds of things. So, like I said, it's a little bit of humility on the human race scale. It could probably do us quite a bit of good, and like people, the guys from Apollo 8 who saw the Earth hanging in space for the first time, all of them were religious men, but they had an experience. They had this epiphany. It was like, do we really have the right to think of ourselves as the purpose of all of this? That sort of thing, that fragile thing just floating in front of us. And the pale blue dot poem brings that even further into focus.
Yeah.
Um, ironically, but because it's a less focused image. But yeah, it's the same kind of idea. It's just, we only have a limited scope, so why not make it the best for everyone around us? Because we'll make ourselves better as we see as the rest of ourselves, as we make those around us better.
Yeah, well said. Well, I do want to leave a few minutes here as we wrap up to carve out maybe a plug for recovering from religion. Could you tell us what recovering from religion does typically in terms of helping those who are working through some of these harder questions, and what's, if someone was looking for help, what they could find if they were to call or connect with recovering from religion, what you do there, and kind of what you'd encourage people to do to get plugged into community.
Yeah, thanks. Recovery from Religion was founded, I think it's like 14 or 15 years ago, I want to say, when our founder, Daryl Ray, who had been a Christian for most of his life, and he stopped believing, but he wasn't out. And he had a consultancy firm where he had like 20 clients that he had had for many, many years, major clients. They were all close. They had worked with each other. They knew each other's families and everything like that. When he published his book and effectively outing himself as an atheist, he lost all but two of them. And he said, there has to be other people who've had this experience where they've expressed doubt or just said that they no longer believed and lost everybody, and just people just turned their backs on them. So he put a notice up in an IHOP. My phrase for this is, all great adventures begin with pancakes. So he posted this, and 11 people showed up, only one of whom he ever knew. And that's when he said to himself, there's a need. There's absolutely a need here. So here we are, 13, 14 years later. Recovery from Religion, our mission statement is very much the best way of putting it. We offer hope, healing, and support for people who are experiencing issues of doubt. If you have, especially if you're in a place where you don't feel safe asking these questions, some places the only place they have to go is they're always referred to other religious people or their pastor, and of course they're always going to try and push them back into the faith. Well, if you're having doubts and you're not happy with your answers, that's not really a satisfying thing to do. And it gets worse if, for instance, somebody's experiencing gender dysphoria or same-sex attraction, because then there's if they come out at all, they're either going to try to pray the gay away or whatever other such nonsense they're going to try and do, or end up shunned again. So this is a place where people can go and safely confide in somebody who is not going to try to deconvert them, not going to try and convince them of anything, but just lead them through a process of answering their questions as best as possible, and more importantly, teaching them how to reach their own answers, pointing them toward resources that people have made, because whatever questions you're experiencing with your current faith, whatever you're struggling with, rest assured, someone else has similarly struggled. Now, everybody's story is different and individual, but in a general sense, there are other people out there who've also done this, and this is a way for people to find us. So we have a phone line. It's 184 I doubt it. And we also have, you go to recoveringfromreligion.org. There's an online chat that you can have. People are on. We like to say 24/7, and it is, but sometimes it gets very busy, so people aren't available. So if you can't get through, keep trying. And there's also, you can actually schedule a call too, where somebody will call you at a specific time that works for you. And it doesn't have to be a call. It could be an online chat too. So basically, again, we're not going to try and deconvert you. We will meet you where you are, because deconstruction does not equal deconversion. There are people who deconstruct their faith and they end up believers on the other side. They've changed some things that they believe. But the problem is, if you're dealing with a high control religion, that still may be problematic. I remember Bart Ehrman saying that the hardest thing for his parents to accept was when he became a more liberal Christian, when he gave up on the idea of biblical inerrancy, than when he actually came out as an atheist later to them. He maintained his Christianity, but he was a more liberal Christian. His family had a bigger problem with that than when he just outright said when he got later on in his life, he got to the point where he was just like, yeah, I just don't believe in God anymore. That was almost like, they've already gone through their mourning at that point. So that, I mean, that could be very difficult for people too. And so it helps to have not just the trained agents like myself. I do take calls. I haven't for a while. I'm trying to get back to it because I've been pulled away other directions. We also have support groups. You can find us on Meetup. You can look for Recovering from Religion on Meetup, and you don't need to register for that. I mean, you can register through Meetup, but obviously you don't need to give your name or anything like that. Uh, and then we also have so these are formal support groups, but we also have an online community, which is based on Slack, which, if you're not familiar with, is similar to Discord, where it's moderated and it's vetted so that, if everybody treats each other with respect. If not, it is acted upon immediately, and it's a very friendly group. It's really good, and I host a hangout every week, every Sunday, and there's another hangout on Friday. And it's very much just talk about whatever you want, and whatever questions you have. Again, whatever questions you have, whatever doubts you're having, whatever conflicts you're having, someone else has at some time had the same thing, and you can meet other people. We have a lot of chat rooms that are people for specific faiths. If you're Jehovah's Witness, a Mormon, Muslim. We do have a group for clergy and ex-clergy. We are not the Clergy Project. That's a different thing, and that's got its own organization and structure, and that's separate from Recovering from Religion. But also good if you're a person whose job it is to be a pastor or a clergy person, and you've lost your faith. That's a great place you can go if you've done that, because they take very, very many steps to keep you safe. Because if you're involuntarily out of it, that could obviously have tremendous material impact on it. But
Yeah.
you're also safe in the online community and Recovering from Religion. You can register for the Slack community. You do have to give them a valid email, but you don't have to give your real name once you're there. You can share as much or as little as you feel comfortable doing. So
Hmm.
I'm also an ambassador, which do things like this, come on people's podcasts, talk about it, and I also go to events, some atheist and skeptic events, but also county fairs, gay pride marches. We do a lot of those, because obviously some of those people could be struggling with their faith, and again, maybe they want to stay Christians, but they're just in a church that doesn't accept, that doesn't accept their sexuality, and so they need somebody to talk to about that. So.
Hmm. That's so
That's
awesome.
a I really should have had something prepared for that because I wandered quite a bit, but there you have it.
That's great. I love it. I appreciate you filling us in. And I'll just add my 2 cents that when I first escaped from religion, from Christianity 4+ years ago, I did call. I called twice. I spoke with someone, I think, in England once and someone in Australia. And it really did help. I know that you can call just once if you want to. You can call over and over. There's not like there was a restriction. And like you
Yeah.
said, they're not trying to push you. They're there to listen and encourage and help and support and just be a sounding board. But if for people, I was already out by that point. But if somebody was like, I'm not leaving Christianity, I just want to talk about some hard questions, just to
Mhm.
know that those people are welcome to call. They're not going to be pressured to become agnostic or whatever. But it was great. I talked to people, and like you said, you can schedule a call for when it's convenient for you, and they call you. And I think the first time I spoke to somebody for at least an hour and a half, and the second time it was probably close to that. And that's a lot of time.
Mhm.
But for the people, I think especially, like for me, that my two phone calls to Recovering from Religion at that point were enough. I was sort of, I guess I kind of always consider myself somewhat self-sufficient in the
Mhm.
sense that I can kind of counsel myself through a lot of things, you might say. But I get people emails and messages and so forth every week from people who are struggling, and occasionally it's someone who's really struggling, like where they're just like, I am in the depths of despair here, and I don't know what to do. It happened recently even, and I was able to direct them to someone I knew in their local area, and they were able to get connected like that day with a Recovering from Religion group, which was awesome. But like it was a situation where I couldn't do much. They're in a very different spot from me, but I care about their story. I care about them. But this stranger's reaching out to me. But because of Recovering from Religion being, in many ways worldwide, they're able to connect either through a phone call, or you said through a chat, or even a local group,
Mhm.
and Zoom calls and so forth, which is
Yeah, most
obviously the
most
world
of
we're in now. But
most of our groups are virtual now. They went virtual during the pandemic, but a lot of them have stayed virtual or hybrid.
Yeah.
So even if it's not in your area, technically, I host the Philadelphia group.
Hmm.
I host the Philadelphia group, but I mean, I don't think we have anybody who's actually from Philadelphia in that group. So I don't think that's going to go live anytime soon.
Yeah.
I am going to try to start another group that'll start out live. Hopefully, we'll see how that works out, but that's not for a little while yet. But some of them do meet in person. So if there's a calendar on the recoveryfromreligion.org page of all the support groups and the contact information for getting it, they're all done by Zoom. And so yeah, they're all there. And yeah, and I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, well, I just say thank you to you for doing that, and thank you certainly
Mhm.
to Daryl for starting it, and for the other great leaders there that have kept it going and moved it forward and evolved it. We thank you for that. It's such
Mhm.
a critical, like one of those things where once you see it, you're like, why wasn't that there this whole time? It's just
Mhm.
like it was like cell phones, like once cell phones evolved to a certain level, it's like, why didn't we have this the whole time? This is awesome. But
Yeah.
you don't know you need it till you've got it. But then once you need it, you're like, you can't live without it. But recovering from religion is certainly in that category, and I'm so glad that it does exist and that it's expanding. So for anyone that can benefit from that, please do. I'll have the links beneath the video, but please do connect with them whatever way is best. I did want to pass the ball to you one last time to say, is there anything else regarding recovering from religion or your story or just any other thoughts on your mind before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, we are not really, we're not counselors. We're not certified in any kind of counseling whatsoever. However, we are peer support, and we will lead you through kind of guiding questions. And when a question of fact comes up, we've got a whole research. In fact, you can go to recoveringfromreligion.org/resources. Tons of things, all organized by topic. So if it's fear of hell, if it's rapture anxiety, if it's same-sex attraction, if it's finding meaning without God, that sort of thing, again, wherever you are. I mean, I've worked with people who went in and came out still Christian, but maybe found a church that was a little more accepting of other people and didn't have so much bigotry associated with it and things like that. So again, we will meet you wherever you are, and not try to, we're not pushing people out. Many of the people who come to who deconstruct do end up not believing, but not all that do. So if you're afraid of that, it's a gradual process, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of thing. You could still have you could still have beliefs, and just maybe feel like you've grounded them better, because most people, especially if you've grown up with religion, you've never really questioned it. I mean, we tend
Yeah.
not to. If especially anything we get from our parents, we tend not to question, whether it's religion or even just attitudes about society. So,
Yeah.
it's not something that we have the critical faculties as children to really evaluate. It falls upon us when we become older in life.
Mm.
So yeah, we're there to help, and we're there as much as you need. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I just want to say, thank you for being able to share your journey with us today. This has been great. Really appreciate you
appreciate
taking
the
the time.
appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, I'll just wrap up by saying we've been speaking with Anthony Dominello. Again, all the links for what we talked about will be, and all the videos we touched on. I'll put all the links for everything we brought up in this interview beneath the video. So please do check everything out if you're interested. But Anthony, thank you so much. Great to hear your story. Great to get to know you.
All right. Thanks. Same here. Take
Thank
care.
you. Have a great day.
You too.